What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Reel Me In, a movie podcast where you didn't really ask for it, but hey, we're going to give it to you anyways. This is a podcast where we talk about anything, everything, and, well, anything about movies. I'm one of your co-hosts, Chase Lee, and hey, guys, listen, if you're new to this, Reel Me In business and you don't know what's going on, you were searching for a movie podcast to get your fix on, and you accidentally stumbled across ours, and you came into the party and you're like, what's this Reel Me In business going on here? And don't be scared. We welcome all the newcomers that find our show. I mean, if you are a movie lover and you just love film so much that you just want to hear other people talk about it and either affirm your conclusions on movies or go against what you thought about movies, then this is the show for you. Please stick around and listen. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. But if you are new to the show, what we typically do is we'll go over some movie news and some movie trailers that drop throughout the week and commentate on them for you guys. And then we will review a movie or movies, ones that come out on the weekend, whether it be a blockbuster, indie, couple indies, couple blockbusters. We like to mix it up for you guys and give you the full spectrum of the industry. And, of course, box office results to accompany that. Well, guess what? We ain't doing any of that because this is episode 236, and this week only, no news, trailers, or any specific new movie reviews. This is all the mid-year report of 2018, what we think are our top 5 best so far and what are our top 5 worst so far. So that is all we're doing today, and hopefully that we make it exciting for you guys as you're kind of keeping track of everything, and I will keep track as well with the whiteboard here in front of me, and then I will list off everything that we have talked about in order. And this is actually perfect, Joel, because it's Saturday, June 30th, so it is literally the last day of the first half of the year, and so it just makes total sense to record it on this day, and so I'm excited to get into some movies. But first, Joel is sitting over there. Joel, how are we doing this week?
I've been pretty good. It's been a really eventful week for me. My grandparents are in town, so they're staying. Watched a bunch of movies with them because I was slowly leading my grandmother through the Harry Potter series, and we finished that this particular trip. Just over the course of like 4 trips, I would watch a couple of movies from the series with her, and I also showed her Fantastic Beasts this week. And I saw a bunch of movies for either to review or to catch up with them for movies that I'm reviewing in the near future. So like I caught up with The Purge election year because I'm seeing the first Purge on Tuesday evening. I caught up with Resolution because The Endless is now on Blu-ray, and that's a semi-sequel to Resolution, which was pretty good. And saw Sicario and Uncle Drew, neither of them very good. So saw a lot of movies, had a 10-year high school reunion last night. It was pretty fun, like a little intimate dinner at a Cheesecake Factory location with some of my fellow graduates. And so a lot going on last week. I have a lot going on in the coming week with a bunch of movies again. There's no evening free, actually, in the next week for me. I'm either closing at work or hanging out with somebody or seeing a movie or celebrating my brother's birthday. So, busy times. That's what happens at the middle of the year, though. And I'm really excited because it's been a pretty good year so far. So for movies, and I mean, not for the world, but for movies it has, and I'm excited to get into this. How was your week?
Joel, since you just announced to the whole world that you're busy every single day this week, we should probably announce to everyone that we are getting a divorce because Joel's just spending way too much time apart, and he doesn't have any time to see me, and it's just, guys, it's getting rocky, and we're going to use this episode as the therapy session.
I need some time to myself.
Okay, fine. Next week, then we'll hang out. This week was pretty fun. Didn't really watch anything new. I reviewed a documentary, Eating Animals, that's on my YouTube page if you guys want to go check that out. Pretty uneventful. Other than that, I got an invite to what is it? Unfriended Dark Web, right?
Oh yeah.
I totally forgot what the title was for a second. Whoops. I got an invite for that, so that'll be fun. But I'm just kind of hanging out with my girlfriend, just watching Game of Thrones, getting caught up for that before April next year, and we got season passes to Six Flags, so we're just kind of hitting that up, enjoying the summer. I haven't really watched any new movies, though, because I didn't see Jurassic World yet, haven't seen Sicario yet, didn't see Uncle Drew. I'm just falling behind, and it's not because I don't have time. It's just, guys, it's expensive, and I don't know what's happening, but I haven't received really an invite besides the unfriended one in like a month.
Or any screeners either. It's been in kind of a dead zone out there.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, besides Eating Animals, which was from IFC, which they're always gracious to send out links, so I always like them. But yeah, I don't know what. Hey, maybe people are catching on to realize, man, that Chase guy sucks, and he's not really a critic. I don't know why we keep handing him out stuff. So, yeah. Other than that, kind of a chill week, and then of course, next week we got July 4th, that random holiday in the middle of the week for some businesses where we have to go to work for 2 days, take off 1 day, and then go to work for 2 more days. What's up with that? That makes no sense. Make it a 3-day weekend. I don't care if you put it in the front end or the back end. You make no sense. You're drunk week, go home. So, yeah. But yeah,
You're drunk home, go week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm excited to get this episode started. So, Joel, just real quick, since you're going to kind of MC this order, go ahead and let people know out there how we are doing today's episode.
Yeah, so he kind of hinted at it at the start of the show. He's going to recap at the end of the episode. But until then, we're going 5-1 on each list, and we're starting with the worst to get that out of the way, and so that we can end the show on a good note. So this is an entire episode to build you up to those number ones. And really interesting. So I might as well go ahead and start, right?
Yeah, and yes. Just before we begin, just one last thing. I know it's going to pain Joel. It's going to pain him so much to know that he cannot put 8th grade on his best list. And I know he's crying inside.
Or Generation Wealth.
I know he's crying, and we'll get through it, Joel. I'm just letting you know that I'm here for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's so our rule is that it's not just what we've seen in the first half of the year. That would be unfair to people who can't see the movies that are on our list for some time, because Generation Wealth, for instance, would be very high on my list. But considering if we did follow that rule, I saw it in May and it would count. But since it opens in limited release on July 20th and in wider release, like not even until August, it's really unfair to you guys because you can't see it yet. So that one's certainly going to be a major contender for the end of the year, but it is not on my list. Also not, I guess I'll get to that later, because what we're going to do is we're not really going to do dishonorable or honorable mentions on this list. We are going to tell you to kind of rip the Band-Aid off what's not on these lists that you might think are. So there might be just a couple of movies that you're like, oh man, I bet this one's on it. And so we're going to clarify that, so you have to guess a little bit about what else made it. It's not going to be too difficult, just because there aren't very many in either categories that we loved / hated. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to do. And I just wanted to say, just to kind of start with a preface to my bottom 5. That 2 movies you might think are in there if you follow my website are not, and those are Dark Crimes and Crystal. Dark Crimes is a thriller with Jim Carrey. Crystal's a weird comedy with Nick Robinson and Rosario Dawson. Both really awful, but those did not quite make it. So if you're following my website, you can already see this list, but don't go look at it right now. Keep with me here. So yeah, I guess I'll just go ahead and start out with my number 5, which is a movie called Supercon. This one comes from director Zach Knutson, who basically, the story of this one is that there's a bunch of convention goers. There's this convention called Supercon that's being held. There's a bunch of convention goers who arrive there. A couple of them are former actors. There's a comic artist. And they decide that they want to rob a self-obsessed actor of his royalties at the convention, which actually happens to be in the 6 figures, because he always charges obstinate amounts of money for autographs or pictures, and also just for the presence of himself at the convention. And the problem is that literally nothing about this movie likes its audience. or likes its setting. It thinks that the setting is just a kind of a gathering for a lot of racist, sexist homophobes. And it doesn't like its characters, because here's the problem. The villain might be a villain in the traditional sense, but it's only because the screenplay positions him as a villain. And I say that because all of the heroes are just as awful as he is. All of them are racist, sexist, homophobes, except for the single female in the group who's played by Maggie Grace. She is clearly, throughout this movie, in existential pain because of what she's having to say with her mouth and what she's having to witness the other actors do with the screenplay. Obviously the screenplay is like barely there. It seems to barely exist, but it's got a sluggish pacing. It's really punishingly like paced. It claims to be quick-witted and fun, but it really moves at such a pace that it feels like it's twice as long as it is. And it basically, the only thing that works about this movie is the fact, and it's entirely unintentional, is the fact that it would work as a cautionary tale about the toxic environment of fan cons, because it's pretty toxic there, at those things a lot. And that's the only way this movie works. It's just not funny. It's not well acted by anyone. No one retains any sort of dignity in their performances. It stars Russell Peters, Ryan Quanten. Clancy Brown plays the villain, if you will. John Malkovich shows up. It's just not good. And so that's my number 5 is a movie called Super Con.
I have never heard that.
All right. Well, are you gonna see it now? I'm just
no,
kidding.
I'm not. Thank you for telling me not to. When I was doing my worst, like, yes, I've seen a lot of bad movies this year, but I was trying to think, like, what were the ones that made me, like, viscerally angry, where I wanted to, like, toss something in my room, or, just cry in the middle of my room with one spotlight on me and just waddle back and forth. Those were the type of movies that I put on my list. And, with stuff like a Maze Runner Death Cure, or like a Winchester, or like a I Feel Pretty. Like, some of them didn't even make it, because I was trying to think of ones that just really chapped my hide. And there was even one that was one of the worst I have seen this year. But unfortunately, Joel and I saw it together, actually. But unfortunately, there was no theatrical run for it so far, and it's still in its festival stages. And Joel, do you remember the good old time we had with the 75-minute documentary called The Blessing? Fun stuff. If that was actually in theaters, I would have put that pretty close to number 1. Yeah. It's atrocious. So my number 5. Let me see. Is this the only one? Yeah, this is the only one I saw via screener in my home, and it was rough to get through at an hour and a half. And that would be a film that could have had a potential because of its star power and its subject matter, by the way. I'm going with Kings, with Halle Berry, Daniel Craig, and this one kind of focuses on the Rodney King trial and the riots that happen within it as a backdrop. And we really kind of focus on Halle Berry's family, and just kind of in the middle of all this chaos as she's keeping her family together. The biggest problem is that at an hour and a half, it feels like it was shortchanged. There could have been more to tell. Ironically enough, it felt like a 3-hour movie. So, pick your poison. Like, what do you want? Do you want a long movie that's not interesting, or a short movie that's really quick and doesn't have enough? The movie doesn't know what it wants to be. And, of course, you have Daniel Craig and Halle Berry giving very lackluster performances. I know, Joel, you feel differently on Halle Berry, right? You thought that she did okay?
Yeah, she was solid enough for what the screenplay gave her. But none of the actors, all of them seemed kind of lost in the weeds.
Yeah, it just seemed like, the director really didn't know what she wanted to do in terms of focus on the backdrop a lot, or the family. It was kind of all over the place, and so it really kind of suffered from this kind of choppy editing that kept going back and forth to a lot of different things, and didn't have kind of that weight you need to have on each scene to have like some type of impact. It just felt like a bunch of fluff just to get up into the actual riots that happened within the last like 10 or 15 minutes. And then, of course, just like the crap cherry on top of the crap cake, one of the worst sequences I've ever seen this year is when Halle Berry is having a wet dream of her and Daniel Craig in this dark studio apartment room with like one light, and it's just awkwardly filmed and edited, and no thank you. So and that was in the middle of the movie, so once I hit that peak, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna I don't know where it could go from here. So yeah, Kings was just for a movie that has like the Rodney King trial as a backdrop, I absolutely love that stuff. I love when movies can take anything from history and use it as not the forefront story, but a background story, and we focus on something else in the front. I actually like that. It's a great way to tell, a different perspective on that event, but this just did not work for me, Joel.
Yeah, no, I mean, it even starts with a scene that hints at the potential, because it starts with the murder of Latasha Harlins, who was the girl. She was killed about 13 days after the Rodney King stuff happened, all the beating and all of that. And, it starts with that scene, so it hints at what it could be doing, but then it just tells this story of a family, and it uses it as a backdrop, yet it starts with something that's directly related to it. So what does it want to do? Does it want to actually tell a story against the backdrop, or does it want to tell the story of the riots? And it doesn't make a decision.
Well, and even towards the end of the movie, it got interesting, but then the movie cuts and goes straight to credits, and it's like, what?
Yeah, and then that erotic dream that you were talking about. Oh my gosh, it would be interesting if they did anything with it at all, because they don't do anything with that potential relationship after that part. So, and it also like has this weird imbalance of tone, because sometimes it can be kind of kooky funny, but then sometimes it's really really sincere and dramatic, and it doesn't make a decision about that either. And it's really, the editing is some of the worst of the year. It's not a movie that I would quite have put on my bottom 5. It's definitely going to be a major contender for maybe the end of the year if I don't see too many worse movies, I guess. Certainly right now it's a bottom 10 contender, but I think just because it begins with the scene that it does, I couldn't give it lower than 1 star. So that's what I gave that one, a D, essentially, on this rating system. So, it's pretty bad, though. Pretty bad. All right, so my number 4 is a movie called Acts of Violence. This one is quite disquieting. So this one's about a young woman who is abducted to be used as a test subject for a drug, and that drug is called carfentanil. Now, people will recognize fentanyl as a drug that's very real, that is causing a lot of problems right now. And the way that this screenplay from Nicholas Aaron Mezzanotte uses that is pretty unsavory, but it's like only one unsavory thing in this movie. All of the women in this movie are either victims or objects of men's desire. The story basically has the brothers of that young woman playing, detective for them, for their own purposes. All of them are pretty violent, psychotic people, I should say. They're going to pursue a drug and sex slavery kingpin played by Mike Epps, and at the same time, a detective played by Bruce Willis catches up to the kingpin's activities. And there's a lot of shootouts that are really flatly staged. The movie is just really, really, really low budget in terms of, as low budget as something that can hire Bruce Willis can be. It just looks very, very amateurish. All of the acting is really bad, especially from Melissa Bologna, who plays the young girl, or the woman who's just been married and she's abducted. And director Bob Donahue cannot work with any of this to make it even remotely interesting or well-made or anything more than creepy on occasion. It's very, very dark, grimy, gritty, and not in fun ways. It's not, it's not like a Michael Mann movie. It's one of those that didn't really get, much of a theater release. I assume it was just LA. It was mostly on VOD back in January. It was our friend Mark Dusick's first 0-star review in like 2.5 years. I didn't quite go that low with it, but that kind of gives you an idea. It's bad. And yeah, that's the next 3 are my 0-star reviews of the year. I only have 3 this year, but this was pretty close. And it's a really disheartening experience for sure. So
See,
number 4, Acts of Violence.
This is the difference between you and I, because I try to stay away from those movies, the ones that look like so badly photoshopped that they look like they belong in like a $5 bin at Walmart. You go out of your way to watch these, so I don't feel sorry for you. You know what you're going to get yourself into, especially when Mark tells you like, yo, I'm giving you a heads up, this is a 0-star. Like, I got you, fam. I'm going to watch it anyways. And you put yourself through torture, Joel.
That's how I roll, man. That's how I roll.
I don't understand you. But, you know what's really funny? I say that only to say this. My next movie pretty much reminds me of a $5 movie in the bin of next to the Walmart movie section. And I saw it in theaters. Now, of course I skipped it because Jill didn't require it to be on the show that week, and I was not going to go waste my time. My girlfriend and I were bored, and we went to go see it. And I think it was like, I'm going to say a week after my birthday. Joel knows where I'm going with this. I love this main actress quite a bit. And I think she is a great talent when she can be put in the right things. Now, I was all on board for seeing a movie where she was the lead. Because I'm like, cool, we finally get to see her kick some ass. Now, I'm not saying she hasn't done it before, but we get to see it, from all of her. She is the main person. We get her and some great supporting characters. But unfortunately, we got a movie that was trying to be this weird mix of grindhouse and black exploitation movies and didn't work at all in any category. And the only saving grace is the main actress because she delivered an okay performance. But everything else was bad. I'm going with Proud Mary. And I love me some Taraji P. Oh, but good Lord, it was rough to sit through. So once again, this goes back to the editing problem. At an hour and a half, the movie felt like it was 3 hours long. And this is a super basic premise. We have Taraji P., who is Mary, and she's this hit woman who's been in the job for quite some time, and she's working for this family. Something goes wrong, and then she gets out of the game, takes care of her son. Not her son, but takes care of a young boy who she kind of encounters along the way. They kind of start a family, yada, yada, yada. Something happens, and then she gets back in the game. It could have been a nice little throwaway action movie, something like a Taken or I don't know. I don't even watch that many of those movies, but something along those lines where you know what you're getting yourself into, but at least it could be fun, entertaining, and maybe the action sequences can be somewhat inventive in terms of the way it's shot and the way it's edited, and just really have its unique voice in this genre. But like I said, for a movie that's super simple at an hour and a half, it feels long, and I felt like nothing was real. There was no stakes in anything. There was nothing grounded. I never felt like her and this young boy had a connection. I didn't feel like her or anyone else acting in the movie was actually like acting as their characters, but just line reading. It's really bad dialogue. The action sequences are that really bad handy cam, let's edit every 2 seconds and give you a seizure type of editing, so you can't really see anything that's going on. You can't appreciate anything that's happening. And for an R-rated film, the action and the violence were tame. And that's all it's rated R for. So I'm like, why was this R? You could have easily done this as PG-13 and probably would have gotten a little bit more money out of it, at the very least. I hate using movies and pushing them just as business things, but this movie needed it. It needed that just push to get a little extra money because it bombed. Yeah, I think I pretty much hit on everything. I think the worst thing, I still have nightmares about it. Danny Glover plays the villain, right? His ADR is so bad, or he's giving like some weird ass accent where I'm just like, that's not him. There's no way that is him. It kind of reminded me of last year, Joel, when we saw The Snowman, and I felt really bad for Val Kilmer and his ADR. It's like, man, like who watches these movies? As a producer and executive producer, who watches these cuts and goes, I like this. Let's put it in theaters. Because this movie reminded me of a really, really bad first draft like cut of a movie. And it just, nothing about it worked, man. And like I said, the only thing that was slightly okay was Taraji, only because she gives her all in anything she does. And this could have been a nice little throwaway action film. Maybe even been an homage to black exploitation movies, which that's what they were trying to go for, but not really. They didn't do their full potential on it. It was a complete misfire. So yeah, my number 4 is Proud Mary.
It's pretty bad. I caught up.
It's pretty bad.
I caught up with this one on Blu-ray. It's not. I definitely don't dislike it as much as you do. I think that Henson's quite good. As far again, sort of like with Halle Berry and Kings, as far as the screenplay will allow her to be.
Yeah.
It really doesn't give her a lot to work with, though. And you mentioned, blaxploitation and all that, but there's also, a familial kind of melodrama with the kid, and it doesn't really work just because it's very melodramatic.
It reminded me of like a Lifetime movie where they focus on making the drama super soapy, but then they are really terrible at action sequences. Like that's what it kind of reminded me.
Yeah, of. It does kind of remind of that. It's pretty negligent, negligible, whatever I'm trying to say there. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I definitely don't have it anywhere near my bottom 5, but I don't blame you. All right, so my number 3, and this is where my F grades start.
Oh man.
Yeah, these following 3, the previous 2 would both get about a D-, and these next 3 are all Fs. And so my number 3 is a film called The Forgiven. Our friend Mark is going to be mad about this because for some reason he liked this movie, and I don't understand why. But this one is called The Forgiven. Basically, it's kind of, sort of, based on semi-true events. It follows Archbishop Desmond Tutu right after the kind of the abolition of apartheid in South Africa, right after the election of Nelson Mandela and the formation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And basically, Tutu had these series of conversations with a bunch of very racist and very violent psychopaths. And so what the movie decides to do is it decides to basically make a conglomerate of all of those people that he talked to into one person named Pete Blomfeld, who is played by Eric Bana. Tutu is played by Forrest Whitaker. And the film is about the conversations that they have where, and they're very repetitive, where essentially the only salient points that are made are basically Tutu thinks that Blomfeld has the potential for redemption, and Blomfeld insists that he does not, and also calls Tutu the regional racial epithet. And there's just a lot of like shock value stuff. There's this subplot involving Blomfeld and a black prisoner who kind of sort of chips away at some of his racist tendencies because the film shows him sticking up for the prisoner, and absolutely none of it does anything to provide any insight into this situation. All it does is provide shock value for the sake of shock value. We're hearing bad words, people being called bad words. That's it. There's some There's a really uncomfortable subplot involving that fellow prisoner, and also the murder of a girl. And yeah, it's absolutely none of this movie um, goes anywhere beyond just providing shock value. And I just wanted to remind people that shock value on the face of it isn't bad, because there's three things you can do. You can provide it, just simply provide it, and that's what this movie only very basically does. You can also provide it to say something about the characters. It wouldn't then just be shock value for the sake of itself. And then also, kind of a half step above that is you can provide expert filmmaking, and this movie does not do that. It's all very dingy lighting, kind of poor film school level sound work. The performances are all dialed up to 11 for the broadest, most generic readings of the characters possible. And yeah, it just doesn't fulfill any sort of potential that anything about it might have had. And that to me definitely highlights what an F is. So yeah, that's my number 3 is The Forgiven.
I mean, I've heard of that one, but I just, once again, guys, if it goes straight to on demand iTunes, I typically don't watch them. It's just not because I don't want to. It's just because, guys, I don't have time during the week. Like my time is very limited to where I either watch theatrical releases, or if I miss them, maybe I can squeeze them in on iTunes. But every single week, I mean, Joel knows this. As a critic, there's always new stuff to watch. So like, if you fall behind, and they get lost. And so, yeah, that was just one of them. However, I might have want to watch that one only because it sounds like one of those things I just have to check out. And to be honest with you, the way you were describing it, even if I would think it was bad, I would still want to watch it probably over this next one I'm about to mention, and that would be, Joel knows that I have a lot of love for certain people in this industry. A lot of people, I will even give them like the benefit of the doubt, even on some of their bad ones, where I'm just like, okay, they had a bad day at the office. But you know what? For this one, I cannot stay silent. I saw it in April. I still don't like it, and I hate the fact that my boy's name's on it. And I'm going to go ahead and say it just to piss Joel off. Blumhouse's Truth or Dare. I do not like this one at all. From its ridiculous premise, which Joel actually, he defended it on the show that week, that it could have been a decent concept to kind of go off of. But the problem is, the concept itself, it's rather dumb when it starts, and then it gets to territory that is almost just kind of irredeemable for the entire movie, because when the end of the movie happens, you're like, what was the point? Like, what was the point? And I'm going to do a slight spoiler if you... I don't even care. The whole world explodes, basically. It's like there was no stopping it. This demon was going to get you no matter what. So what we were witnessing, we were supposed to have, this connection towards these characters. Like, oh man, they went out and they threw out that good fight before the world ended. No, they didn't. They made stupid decisions. All their dialogue was terrible. All the characters I did not care about, especially the, what was her name? Because I got everything open right here. Blondie. Violet Bean, the one that plays Marky. Oh, woof. And on top of that, her character reveal with the main character Lucy Hale, I'm like, what? Like, why is this in the movie as a mid-movie reveal, as they're like, this is why I've hated you so long? It's like, no, what she did was kind of messed up, yo. So that just goes back to, like, not caring about anything. Especially when they drop that on you in the middle of the movie, and Joel knows what I'm talking about. You're like, I don't care what this main character does. Lucy Hale can die in the next scene for all I care, and it doesn't really matter. And speaking of dying, and death and just violence. This has got to be one of the most violent, kind of in-your-face, very mature PG-13 films I've seen in quite some time, where we're dealing with, like suicides, teens pulling out guns on people, sexual harassment. Like, it was just weird, man. I was just like, what kind of tone is this going for? Is it like supposed to be mature and try to say stuff, or is it just, a throwaway PG-13 jump scare movie? On top of that, speaking of the jump scares, not really inventive. The kills are kind of lame, to be honest with you, especially when you have something like Truth or Dare where you could literally do anything you want, and some of the kills are just whatever. And of course, infamously from the trailers, you have the smiley Joker faces that I remember when I saw in theaters, everyone was laughing the entire time when someone smiled and did the weird Joker smile right before our character died. It was just, it's funny, and it's like, it's not. I don't think they were supposed to go that route, and if it was supposed to be a dark comedy, I missed it. So that goes back to like the whole direction of this thing. They don't really know what it wants to be, and yeah, it's a horror movie to where I could respect it if it was actually executed a little bit better, and maybe just take this concept and making it just super silly. They should have made this into a horror comedy right off the bat. I don't know why they tried to make it as serious as they did. And you're probably like wondering if you've seen it. You're like, well, I was laughing throughout the entire time, but it's like when the director and the writers try their best to throw out very thematic stuff that's supposed to kind of rock the boat a little bit, especially with that mid-movie plot drop, they're trying to be serious. And when you do stuff like that, when everything else is so piss poor, I cannot take you seriously. And you make everyone unlikable, and then at the end of the movie, it was just kind of like, what was the point type of deal. And I don't know what was the point. What was the point of this even being made? It's because as much as I love my boy, Blumhouse is also smart, and Jason Blum knows how to capitalize on stuff, and that's his producer's side, and I can't really fault him for that. But if he's going to do throwaway stuff every now and then, just at least try. This did not try at all, so I'm doing Truth or Dare for this one.
I'm surprised that's actually not your number one, but yeah, it's pretty lame. I didn't dislike it as much as you did. You're right. I kind of did defend the premise. I think that actually even
I like
more
how
than
you sounded like a '90s kid. You're like, it was pretty lame, man.
It was pretty lame, man. It wasn't radical. Just kidding.
It wasn't too radical enough.
No, but yeah, I mean, even more than a horror comedy, I think if you just set this all in one room and do like a chamber drama, get rid of the weird faces they make and just kind of go with the premise, because the premise has a lot of potential. And that's why
sold me on that idea. I wouldn't mind doing like a one room, one location type of Truth or Dare game. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, where you don't even have to make like these supernatural ways of using real world things to kill the characters. Just have their head snap back or something like that, where it's just, they're all trapped in a room and something is literally just supernaturally killing them. And that would have been a lot more interesting than what they came up with, which was just a bunch of melodrama, basically. A lot of melodrama with some cheap jump scares, and it's pretty bad. I didn't hate it as much as you did, but it's pretty lame.
What did you think about, like, because I know that you still probably think about it periodically, just like I do. What did you do you still shudder when you think about that mid-movie plot drop that Marky gives?
It's such a melodramatic moment where you have this, like, the stakes are so much more high for those characters at that moment, and you can't buy into any of them because you're not really close. You don't really find the characters likable, and then that also removes any goodwill that they might have as characters. So you don't really feel anything when stuff happens later. So yeah, it's such a dumb reveal too. It's kind of irresponsible of the screenplay to do something like that, and it just doesn't work.
That would be like if Joel and I were in a movie and we were in a haunted house, right? And we were like running away from these ghosts. And, like, in the middle of everything, like, this ghost is chasing us. Joel and I go through a room, right? We close the door, we lock it. And I turn to Joel and go, Joel, you remember 15 years ago when you thought that someone stole your sandwich in the break room and I said it wasn't me? Well, guess what? It was me. And you're like, what does it have to do with what's going on? It's like, that's what it was like. It was just weird.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. My number 2 is unfortunately from A24. Although they will redeem themselves later on in the episode, for sure. It's called The Vanishing of Sydney Hall. And this one stars Logan Lerman as a young writer who is being compared to people like Holden Caulfield and David Foster Wallace. And he has basically the plot of the movie follows him at 3 different points in his life. When he's starting out as an author, when he has made it as an author and there's a young man who's killed himself in direct response to the work, and also when years later he disappears. And so it obviously provides a bunch of mysteries as to, why is he such a, great author. And that certainly doesn't really hold up when we hear parts of the book that he wrote, because they're all really terrible excerpts. Why did he, why did the guy kill himself? Why did Sidney himself disappear? And again, with kind of with The Forgiven, none of this actually provides any insight into this person except to reiterate for us throughout why, how awful he is. He's essentially, it's basically the concept of toxic masculinity kind of in a person, because it's always all about his ego. Everything comes back to him. His entire reason for existence is to pat himself on the back or to worry about himself. And so all of the stakes surround his character to the point that it cares about nothing else. So everything that happens to everyone else is always in relation to him. And so you have this character of a girl that he meets and really likes and ends up marrying, played by Elle Fanning. This mysterious person, maybe a cop, maybe not, just called the Searcher in the credits, played by Kyle Chandler. And just all these characters, every single thing that happens is in relation to his ego, and none of it's insightful. None of it is even interesting, and it's, again, all about shock value, because parts of his book are highly, highly sexual, and it actually introduces us to him by him reading off a journal entry in school about a sex dream that he had about his stepmom. So that kind of gives you an idea of like what this character is like. There's nothing here that is redeemable, and it all just kind of is uselessly put into a triptych, kind of a small little three little vignettes that none of them provide any insight. None of them are more interesting than the other ones, and it's all just a complete waste of time. And so yeah, I hated this movie. A24 steps wrong, but this might be my least favorite thing they've ever done. And this might honestly make you it might honestly, if you saw it, it might make you kind of renege on the whole Spring Breakers / Barely Lethal is the worst A24 movie. I can assure you this would probably redefine that.
Wow,
it is
that is a statement right there.
I know, and honestly, this is a character completely worthy of every single bad thing that happens to him in the movie. And there's some bad stuff, but he is worthy of it because he is entirely unworthy of sympathy. There could not be a less interesting character in a movie this year, and the whole thing revolves around us, finding interest in this character, and it doesn't work because he's just awful. He's just an awful person. And I did not like this movie. I'm glad that he vanished.
Oh God. I'm glad he went away.
Maybe it should be called, and this is my terrible joke of the week. Maybe it should be called The Vanishing of Sydney Hall is a really good thing.
Oh my God.
So there we go.
Like some character just comes out at the very end like, this vanishing of Sydney Hall, damn, that was a good thing. And it's like, what? Like, I thought this was bad.
And if y'all are surprised that this isn't my number one, oh boy. All right. Anyway, so that's my number 2 is The Vanishing of Sydney Hall.
Well, I remember when Joel texted me, and I actually had an option to see this, by the way. I got the email, and I could have signed up for it. Guys, once again, time management. That's how you're gonna survive in life and not be as stressed. No, I remember Joel said, I have a 0-star movie, and it's like, what? Like, isn't it like, because when this came out, like March or April, so it was pretty early on, and I was like, oh, which one is it? And I didn't even think about the Sydney Hall movie, and then once he told Brian and I in our group chat, I was like, so I will definitely stay away from it, which is really disappointing because A24, they have, they put out some of, I'm not going to say the word, but I will cautiously say that A24 might have put out some all-timers in their respective genres this year so far, and that's saying a lot considering the fact that they have been doing that consistently for the past 5 years. So it's disappointing, but it is what it is. All right, so my number 2. This is a true story. For number 2 and number 1, I saw both of them by myself, and since I have no car, they were on nights where my girlfriend was going to pick me up. So she picked me up from both of these movies, and wow, did I have a lot to say after each one of them.
I know what they are. I don't know which one's first, though.
Yeah, exactly. So this one could have had potential for something that was quick and maybe short-lived in real life. Could have been expanded into something inspiring, heroic, badass, and just really make you leave the theater wanting to be a good person and help out when other people are in need. But unfortunately, we have a director, and I'm, knock on wood, Joel and I have reported on several stories about, his next projects, and, we're excited for him. But when you see stuff like this, I get a little worried. I got to go with the 15 to 17 at Paris. It's I'm not gonna rag on the acting because I did that enough on the actual show, but the acting all around is bad, and it's not just because Clint decided to cast the 3 main leads who were actually a part of the actual event that happened on the train and them stopping, a terrorist from gunning people down. I get that. That's heroic. I have nothing against them as people, but as actors, they should stay away from movies. And I'm sorry, even with the under the direction of Clint and maybe him coaching them, it just did not come across well at all. And even then, as a counterpoint, Clint had real actors in there, and they did poorly. Like, the acting all across the board is awful. And on top of that, you have a script that just, it seemed very generic, very first, kind of rough draft type of stuff where it could have been punched up a little bit more. It wasn't compelling. And the problem is with stuff like this is when the actual event Joel, what was it? Only 6 minutes in real life or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So when you have an actual event that happened less than 10 minutes, it's kind of hard to stretch it out into an hour and a half movie. And this movie is already hurting on time. It's only an hour and 34. You minus 10 or so for the credits. We're looking at less than an hour and 25-minute movie. So you have to have a lot of padding. I get that, but you have to make it compelling padding. When you have the movie kind of start out with them as children, and oh god, the child actors. Oh, I know. I'm having flashbacks. The children in this movie are just as bad as the adults, and it's like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do after school. We should go shoot guns. That sounds pretty cool, man. And it's like, what? Who wrote this dialogue for these kids? So it starts out when they're kids, and they eventually grow up, and We see them go to the military, except for one of them. One of them does not. And then, of course, they meet up on their trip, and then they go on the train. And it's a very generic kind of like structure, which, like I said, I don't mind. You could have delivered it a lot better. And the editing, once again, in this one is so bad because it doesn't give you enough time on anything. It's just like, cool, let's have the kids. Okay, 10 minutes has gone by. We got to switch. All right, let's go to them as adults. Oh, hey, I want to join the military. Oh, we're done with that. Let's go on. It's just, there's no weight to anything until they actually get on the train.
Let's order gelato for 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's order gelato, try them out, and go, this is a wonderful flavor. That's awesome. I wish I could be there with you, but I don't need to see that in a movie. And I also forgot to mention, speaking of the editing, it's non-linear. They keep flipping back and forth between present time and past, and that does not work when your editing is already jarring. If it's compelling stuff, I don't mind that. But when you're flipping back and forth between things I don't care about, then it makes it such a bore. And it's an hour and a half long. So yeah, on top of all that, I will give the movie some credit. Where the actual attack happens, I know it's really bad to say because it actually happened in real life, but the attack in the movie was well edited. I kind of enjoyed it. I actually got into it, but the problem is you're already an hour and 15 minutes deep into this movie. You just really don't care at this point. But I appreciated like some effort taken on that actual sequence. It was really gripping to kind of see them take, this gunman down when they didn't have any weapons and they were just kind of using their wit and their strength and everything. I thought that was really cool. That is the type of stuff that you stand up and you cheer for, but when everything else before is so bad on a filmmaking level, I can't give you any slack. And on top of that, with the sequence on the train, they were pushing some boundaries on the violence a little bit. I was like, how did this get through an R-rated appeal? Because it was originally rated R. I don't know how they got it down to PG-13, but there were like stabbings and blood was shooting out. And I'm like, how did they... I know this has nothing to do with the review. It's just a side thing. But I was like, how did they get away with this? But yeah, I just think... like I said, I applaud Clint for getting the real-life people. But it did not work, and it was just very poorly acted to where anytime these guys spoke any ounce of dialogue, I not only, one, didn't believe it, and two, super cringeworthy to just sit there and see these guys suffer through, like Joel said, like very, lingering scenes with buying gelato or ordering food. It's just, it's embarrassing for them because I know that these are awesome guys that prevented this attack from happening. And, I will always look at them as heroes, but as actors, man, it just didn't work, and they deserve better for their story. So this is my number 2.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I felt like I put it pretty well. It's reading about this is enough to know that these guys are heroes. We don't need to see a movie about it because there's not a story here. There's enough of a story for like a short film, maybe if they'd have done that, like a reenactment. But that's what it amounts to anyway. And
I think that's what you and I said when we reviewed it. It's like this could have worked way better as just like a really powerful short film or something.
Yeah, which of course Clint Eastwood would never do that. But in any case, it's pretty bad. It makes a lot of unfair assumptions of the audience. That for instance, that they think that this story is enough, which might be the right one. That these guys are the ones to follow, which might not really be the right one, and that these guys can play themselves, which is definitely not the right one, and it's pretty poor. I found a lot to like in his recent historical movies with American Sniper and especially Sully. I like those movies a lot more than a lot of other people seem to. But yeah, this one's right about there where a lot of people were saying that it was, bad. So, yeah, not very good. All right, guys, we are at my number 1. All right, so Chase. Whether or not you saw it, I assume that you remember, at least vaguely, Then in 2010, there was a movie called Furry Vengeance that came out.
Oh my God.
Do you remember that movie? Did you see that movie?
You know what's really funny is that I didn't see it, but I worked at the theater at the time, and I got in for free, right? I still didn't want to see it, and I would just kind of pop in my head every once in a while just to see Brendan Fraser rolling on the ground like with a CGI animal. I was like, I'm good, and I walked out.
Yeah. So my number one is a family film that made me long for that movie.
I can't believe you're going this route. I cannot believe you're going this route.
My number one is Woody Woodpecker.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hey,
okay.
listen, all of our people from Brazil right now hate you. All the people that are listening right now absolutely hate your guts.
Yeah, probably so. And to them I say, sorry. Well, actually, not sorry. Hashtag sorry, not sorry. Yeah, this is a horrifying movie about a psychopathic bird that wants to kill an entire family. Meanwhile, the father of the family is a guy who wants to raise the part of the woods that the bird is in and build a big garish blue house that doesn't fit the backdrop and not live in it. He wants to build it for tax reasons. So maybe maybe the bird is actually justified in this. Except for the fact that he is an incorrigible menace who electrocutes several people, definitely kills one construction worker, and attempts to murder the family on 2 occasions, one time involving pouring cement into their SUV while they are in it, and also trying to blow up their RV while they're in it. His 5-syllable laugh is the stuff of nightmares, and part of the plot involves a couple of poachers who try to sell him on the black market, and in doing so, kidnap a couple of kids. This movie is horrifying. Like I said, it's a really cynical, almost oppressively cynical movie that anybody over the age of 3 should be able to recognize all of these things. It has no value, and by that I mean literal. Merit is a different argument. Merit is all about the specific subjective value of certain things about the filmmaking. This is a movie without any objective value. And I would not be surprised if we are talking about this again at my number one at the end of the year. So I'm telling you, this movie is awful. And to just give you guys the 2 words that ended my review and ended the little blurb that I made on my list that I made this week, good riddance. It's awful, 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 awful. And it's you should definitely see it. I'm just kidding.
I've seen plenty of reviews online where they actually go in depth to each scene. So I've already seen the movie. I just haven't seen it like in its like live form. I've seen it in chopped up sequences, and it looks horrendous. And I think what's really funny is like when Joel mentions the psychopathic bird angle, he's not lying. When you watch these scenes, Woody like blows up a trailer with a person in it, looks at the camera and kind of does this like almost like a Jack Nicholson from The Shining smirk on his face. I'm like, yo, you just killed someone. And then the person walks out in very Looney Tunes fashion, and you're like, wow, this is for children. So I can't believe you sat through that. You knew what you're getting yourself into with that. So I knew.
Well, here's the thing: is like I said, I'm always an optimist. Always am up for finding out whether or not something like this does work for me, because it has in the past. I will admit that. But yeah, I mean, I probably should have just turned it off at some point. But for me, it's like, because I've watched this at home, and so I didn't have to walk out of anywhere unless I just walked out of my house. But if I was in a theater, I probably would have left. Honestly, I might have, even if I get free tickets. I don't know why I stuck with it. I probably should have just turned it off, and then The Vanishing of Sydney Hall would be my number one, and a very worthy one. But I stuck with it, and I watched it all, and now here we are, and it's absolutely, absolutely awful. And to mention our friend Mark again, he watched this, but he decided to watch it without the expectation or any sort of like desire to review it, and so he doesn't feature it on his website anywhere, but he would have also given this 0 stars. And that's what he told me. So he also watched this. But yeah, it's a bad one, man. It's short, thankfully, I guess, but any sort of length for this is too long. So honestly, like 2 minutes is too long. No one here, none of the human characters are likable. Certainly the bird is not, and it's just like 85 minutes of pain or however long it is. And yeah, just terrible, awful, worthless movie. 91 minutes. That's how long it is. So, all right, sir. I have figured out your number one, but let the people know what it is.
Okay. So when I left the 15 and 17 in Paris, I, told my girlfriend, I was like, I don't think anything else can make me this angry. Oh boy, was I wrong. And you know what's really funny about this first pick? The acting from the main characters is decent. Cinematography is fine. Music is fine. It really comes down to character decisions, and the way the movie ends is it will turn you off from the entire experience completely to where you will never want to watch that movie again. So, which is, like I said, ironic because like Truth or Dare, 15 to 17 in Paris, like they have atrocious acting and there's really nothing great about them on a filmmaking standpoint. This actually has decent cinematography, decent acting. And I'm going to spoil it, by the way, so get ready for that. But my number one, when I left that theater, I was just kind of stunned that when the movie was done, the people behind me said, and I quote, "What a sweet little romantic movie." Now, I want you to keep that quote in your head. And I'm going to give away how this movie ends. So here we go. My number one, worst so far, and I'm hoping something beats it. I'm going to go ahead and just say that. Because you know what? I respect these two actors. I respect the hell out of them. But man, I don't know why they chose to be in this. I'm going with The Leisure Seeker. And if you guys don't know what this one's about, Helen Mirren and Donald Sutherland are a married couple. They've lived together and been married together for quite some time, and so they kind of want to just take a road trip, and they get in their Leisure Seeker and they head out. And it's because it's a sweet thing. I mean, Donald Sutherland has what is it, Joel? Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
So he has Alzheimer's, and so he may not remember his wife sometimes or remember his kids. So his wife does a lot of sweet things like maybe play home videos in front of him and, get an RV and go to destinations that they went to when they were younger. Like, it sounds like a sweet little adventure. Okay. I'm going to go not beat by beat, but I'm going to give you like several points in just the beginning that were really bad. And then I'll get into the, ending and kind of how this kind of plays out. So first of all, I don't really care about political things in movies if it's justified or if it fits in with the story. But the way this movie begins is already a turnoff. I am by no means a fan of our president. I'm not a fan. I despise the guy. But even this was tacky, even for this movie. It opens up with Trump audio from one of his rallies. I'm like, what does this play? I mean, it plays somewhat of a part, like kind of later on, but even then, completely pointless. You should have taken that out. So that's not. It's not because I don't like the guy. That it's because it does not make sense story wise. So that was already a turnoff. Then we start with their son, who was doing this weird like stilted line reading that was like, "Yes, father, mother, how are you doing? Father, he is gone once again in the RV. Mother, where are you at?" And it's like, yo, like who found this guy? Go back to acting class. And I know Joel is gonna he would rebuke that because he's like, well, this guy's been in a lot of stuff. I don't care. He's terrible in this. So we start out with the son, right? Then we get to like the daughter, and she's just as bad. And we're just like, all right, cool. When are we actually gonna get to the main characters? Then we get to Donald Sutherland, Helen Mirren, and they take the RV and they go to specific spots. And like I said, their chemistry is good. I believe that they're a married couple of some sort, and they have a lot of sweet and tender moments. A lot of scenes were actually well acted. Not really well shot. It's kind of a flat movie, to be honest with you. Like I said, some of the cinematography works, and by some, I mean like some wide shots, but a lot of stuff takes place in RV parks, and that's not really visually compelling. So a lot of their moments together are pretty good. Now, the fact that he's got Alzheimer's and stuff, he can't really remember things, or when he's talking to his wife, he thinks he's talking to someone else, and so, I get that. That's a part of, his character and his condition. I totally get that. He runs off to a retirement home and tries to see his friend, and Helen Mirren's got to chase him down and stuff. It's, once again, another sweet moment. So you're probably thinking, like, why is this so high up on your list? I'm not even joking. This is how the last 20 minutes go. Since he has Alzheimer's, he looks at Helen Mirren straight in the face and forgets that he's talking to his wife. And he's talking to his neighbor. And, this was a neighbor that they lived next door to for the longest time. So Helen Mirren's just like, okay, I'll bite. What are you talking about? Because he thinks that he's talking to his neighbor, and of course, that's not his neighbor, that's his wife, and so she's just sitting there, just kind of listening. He reveals that he cheated on her for many, many years. Okay, and she's just like, "Oh wow, you've been cheating on me with our neighbor while I was pregnant," and at that point, we're supposed to like the guy. You dropped this bomb on us towards the end of the second act. And that's supposed to be your reveal? No. And so he's... And not only that, it's super sad to hear him tell his wife this. Because he has Alzheimer's, and so you feel bad for him, but it's like, he cheated on his wife. And I don't know how people feel about that stuff, but I hate that stuff in real life and in movies. And so when he revealed that, I was like, I'm done. I'm checked out. So you're probably thinking to yourself, that's it? That's all I have? No. It gets worse. So he reveals that. And so that's already the strike one. Strike two is when Helen Mirren comes back. And once again, they have kind of a tender moment where they have sex one last time. Because maybe he's not going to make it. That's not where my issue comes in. My issue is that she goes, oh, hey, my husband's not going to make it. I'm going to gas up the RV with, Joel, what is it?
I have no idea. I haven't seen the movie.
Oh, whoops. Oh, so never mind. I'm spoiling it for him. All right. So, she,
I have no interest in watching this movie anyway. So
that's what it is. Carbon monoxide. So she starts it up, the RV, and she gasses both of them. And they die the Notebook style, holding each other in the bed. Why did she do that? Why didn't she call her kids and tell her? Well, like, she sent them a note, and she just left it somewhere and was like, if you get this, sorry for everything. It's like, what the hell is this? So she gasses both of them in the RV. They die. The next scene is the funeral. And then in the funeral, as the caskets are being lowered, the son looks at his sister and is just like, oh, well, it was going to happen anyways, that's really sad. Oh, well, I guess we can do whatever now. And they just walk off and the credits roll on top of that. That's strike three. That was some of the worst fumbling I've ever seen in a romance movie. You could have been set up to have a decent romance where you're like, okay, cool, he's got Alzheimer's, she's trying to spark his memory up, it's getting worse, he might die. I have no problem with that. It's the way you take the characters and the way you end it that make me go, why? Why did it end like that? That seems totally out of place with everything that was going on. And people might fire back and go, oh, they're old, it was towards the end of their time. That seems pretty selfish of me, to not only kill your husband like that, but to kill you with him. Like that, no. Just no. And if you think I'm joking, watch the movie, and whatever I just told you is 100% truth. And I don't know how the person behind me, Joel, was like, that was a sweet little movie. Sweet for who? The deranged Notebook crowd? I love me the Notebook. I actually like that movie. Because it made sense towards the end, and it was a very well-directed sequence that, was just a nice culmination of acting and music. It was really beautiful to witness. This just fell out of place and was like, cool. They did this. They killed themselves, and the kids were just like, oh, well, we're at our parents' funeral, and they just walk away. They walk away, and the credits roll on top of that. What? So there you go. That's my least favorite of the year so far. I just, like I told you, acting decent, chemistry there, couple missteps in the first act, then it just kind of unravels, Joel, and it will make you angry.
Man, well, I'm glad I skipped it, for sure. All right, well, that's our lists of the worst films of the year so far, and we will now segue to our list of our favorite films of the year so far.
So Joel, just real quick, like what were some of the ones that just rapid fire, like, that didn't make it? I want you to surprise me.
Well, so I'll basically just give a couple of them, but two that people might think are on the list from praise on here or praise on my website. The Insult, which is one of last year's Oscar nominees for foreign language film, opened this year in January and expanded throughout February, and I was able to see that one, and it's fantastic, but didn't quite make it. And also Avengers: Infinity War, which was one that I think is certainly one of the very best of MCU, just didn't quite make it on the list of 5. But and I also have a bunch of other contenders that clearly they didn't get 4 stars like the other two did, but Black Panther and Lean on Pete and Isle of Dogs and all of that. I love those movies. Won't You Be My Neighbor, Zama, Thoroughbreds, Tully, The Writer, A Quiet Place. So love Simon, Incredibles 2, How to Talk to Girls at Parties, and that is it. Those are my 3.5 star movies. And so, those didn't make it, but I have a pretty solid list of 5. So at number 5, to go ahead and get us started. Well, I guess if you wanted to go ahead and give your rapid fire list of ones that didn't quite make it for you, we could go and do that. Which are ones that you were surprised yourself, and what other people might be surprised didn't make it for you.
I rated The Strangers Prey at Night pretty highly, but just as the months kept going, that didn't make it. Love Simon's not on there, and Won't You Be My Neighbor is not on there, even though I watched other with glowing reviews. First Reform's not on there. Cameron Post, Generation Wealth, Avengers: Infinity War. Avengers: Infinity War is not on there. And of course, I have to give.
Are you really Chase Lee?
I know. This is where it boiled down to just experience in the theater. And as much as I loved Infinity War, I saw it twice. The 5 that I'm going to mention really just kind of floored me on many different levels. And and of course, A Quiet Place. But I think the biggest shock is probably Infinity War, Won't You Be My Neighbor, First Reformed, and The Strangers Prey at Night.
If I had a number 6, I think it would be Avengers. That's probably where that is right now. So that and The Insult have a really good chance of still being in the top 10, unless I just see a bunch of stuff that I love. And of course, then there's also rewatch season at the end of the year where stuff's gonna move around because of reconsideration. But certainly it's a tough year to pick 5 so far, honestly. But at number 5 is one of 2 movies that we saw together at the film festival here in Dallas that have opened before the midway point of the year. And at number 5, I have Hearts Beat Loud. And this one is a drama comedy hybrid about a father and a daughter who are trying to rediscover what it means to live after their wife and mother died. Frank, played by Nick Offerman, is the owner and operator of a record store that is not seeing great times right now, even with the recent resurgence of vinyl. The daughter, played by Kiersey Clemens, is a prospective medical student who begins a relationship that she knows can't really go anywhere, but she's just kind of trying to enjoy the last few weeks of staying here. And their lives are kind of on the precipice of changing forever because they're not going to be around each other a whole lot. But they decide to record a song, which kind of goes viral a bit on a streaming service, and they decide to record a couple more songs. And this movie is a movie that has provided characters that are capable of great compassion, great pain. They're humans, and they seem like humans. They seem very real. The film is very polished in terms of its production. It definitely feels, in terms of its cinematography, like something off the CW, but it doesn't really matter because of the treatment of the plot and the characters is so honest and so sweet and so tender. And I really liked this movie. It's a good movie, and by that I mean in terms of value. It's a very sweet film, and I love its use of music as well because the 3 songs that they create are they're very catchy. They work as pop songs, and they work in the context of movies, in the context of music that connects everyone and everything. I haven't seen music used this well in a while in a movie, in a fictional movie, and so that's my number 5 is Hearts Beat Loud from director Brett Haley.
Yeah, I saw that with you, like you just said, and I totally agree with him. I even gave it a high grade. It's just a very feel good movie. It just warms your heart, kind of like there was 2 movies that did that at the festival. It was that and Won't You Be My Neighbor, where you walk out going, man, you feel like you're on a different planet. You're like, I don't even feel like myself anymore. But no, Nick Offerman, really great stuff. The music is really catchy. And it was definitely a good time at the festival. But, I couldn't put it on there. But my number 5, I struggled to either put, Infinity War or something else in the spot. But I was like, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I love it. I don't know if it's my favorite of his. But I can tell you right now, just watching in the theater, I think he outdid himself with the stop motion. I'm going with Isle of Dogs. I absolutely adore this movie quite a bit. I think going back to the stop motion, he did outdo himself with the backgrounds and the dogs and the clothes. It's so beautiful and so eye-catching that it looks like live cinematography with real life people and things, and it's just, no, they're all miniatures, and that's such a great thing when they can fool you that much into thinking it's, something of like an epic live action movie, but it actually was all filmed on a little table in a sound stage. I think that was awesome. I think the voice talents are all wonderful. They match their dogs and their personalities, and they actually give a lot of pop to the movie. I realize that I'm hearing the actors and the actresses' voices, but they fit so well with their dog counterparts that it's quite shocking. It's just a really fun adventure. I do have a couple problems with maybe one of the storylines involving Greta Gerwig's character, or maybe one of the reveals that Bryan Cranston has as the dog towards the end. But that didn't really bother me too much because I enjoyed the kind of political commentary. I enjoyed the social commentary. I enjoyed the animation style. The music is so good, and it just really adds to the culture of the film and really makes it epic. And because like I said, the animation is already on this kind of like epic scope, but the music just kind of takes it up to the next level, and just a really enjoyable movie from start to finish. And on top of that, I think the drama works really well, and it's counterbalanced with some really great humor and some humor with the humans and humor with the dogs. It's just, the more I think about it, Joel, the more it just kind of gets me. And I think out of all the movies I've seen this year, this has got to be top 3 soundtracks for me, just because I remember sitting through the credits as the movie ended, and I didn't leave. I sometimes leave, even if I am stunned by a movie, just because I have to go to the bathroom or something, because, hey, Crohn's disease, right? But no, Isle of Dogs, it was one of the few movies that sat me down because Wes Anderson forced you to listen to that music with the animation happening with the sumo wrestlers hitting the bongo drums or whatever, and it was kind of invigorating. It was just really energetic music that just kind of punched up the credits even more, and I loved it, man. And I forgot to mention this, I'm sorry. Isle of Dogs is, set in Japan, and the leader of Japan has ousted all dogs to this island, Isle of Dogs, and this boy who's lost his dog goes there and tries to search for his dog. That's basically the plot, and then of course kind of sprinkled in with a couple other storylines and a lot of the commentary that I mentioned. So Isle of Dogs is my number 5.
Well, it's a delight, and this is actually still in my top 10. This is one of the higher rated 3.5 star movies that I have. A-, like leaning toward an A. I wouldn't be surprised because at the end of the year, this kind of ranking kind of goes out of the window a bit for me. Because what I'll do is I'll rewatch stuff that I then have higher opinions of the next time, and this is one of those that I can definitely see that happening. So it's fairly close. It's such a good movie, and it's such a terrific aesthetic marvel. Like it really is. Just the animation, the score, as you said, I think is probably the best score of the year so far, or very high on that list. It's a real delight, even if it's dark and occasionally kind of dank and gritty. It's still a delight because it's Wes Anderson who he just does that, and it's so good. I have the same kind of hang-ups as you do, but I respect the choice. It's a great choice. So all right, my number 4 is the other movie that we saw together at the film festival, and that is Three Identical Strangers. This is a documentary about 3 men, Bobby Shafran, David Gelman, and Eddie Galland, who discover over the course of several weeks or months that they are all related and that they were all separated at birth. I will not go any further into telling you what this documentary is about, only that it gets to the heart of corruption, and that's it. That's all I'm going to say. And this thing is a wild ride. It's a total roller coaster, but it never cheats. It's never trying to shock you into whoa. Even though it does, it's very much telling a story, and it's telling it chronologically, and what comes with that is a bit of a shock. More than a bit of a shock to discover what the story is here, why they were separated, all the relevant details related to that. It's such a great documentary. It's a thriller. It's a comedy. It's a familial drama. It's just great. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a while. If not for a movie that if it had opened already would actually be higher than this one. That's also a documentary, and that's Generation Wealth. This is certainly quite a bit up there for me. So that's my number 4 is Three Identical Strangers.
Well, Joel, that's fantastic, but I'm going to pass. I think you knew that was coming.
Yeah, for sure.
So my number 4. Also, another movie to where the ending happened. I was stunned in the theater for quite some time. It almost had the same effect as Isle of Dogs because its score was also entrancing and just really kind of sucks you into the movie and this kind of like bleak atmosphere and bleak characters. But you know what's really funny? Like even in the dark depths of this character, there's a beating heart there, and you know that it's filled with greatness and hope, but there's just so much, weighted, darkness on top of him that he cannot, kind of get through what is actually in the center of his heart. And I was kind of blown away by a couple things. Its simplicity, its main performance, and just the way it was directed, and just kind of keeps you on edge, and you're so in tune to this character because of the actor, and this is why he's one of the best, because he could literally be in anything, and I'm going to watch it. I got to go with You Were Never Really Here. That movie right there, if no one has seen it now, I implore you, if you want, it's a very bleak movie, like I said, and the ending does leave you in this really kind of fractured state of mind because you think everything's fine, but you know deep down there's a lot of darkness within him. But there is some hope at the end of the tunnel, considering who he's with. But I don't want to spoil it for you. But on top of all that, it's just one of those movies that you kind of have to see to believe because it's a really great character piece. And to kind of give you insight into what it's about, Joaquin Phoenix plays a veteran who basically does not flinch at any type of violence, and so he tracks down missing girls and pretty much vigilantes his way through the people that have done these girls wrong, and he kills them. And when something kind of happens where it's out of his control, his kind of PTSD gets a little bit to the better of him and really kind of affects his work. And then he encounters a possible friend, and they kind of do their thing. And so, like I said, the movie it's simple, but it's complex. And what I mean by that is its story is not really nothing we've never really seen before, but it's the way it approaches it is in how it makes itself different. And by that, I mean Lynn Ramsey, who directed and wrote this, she focused on Joaquin Phoenix's character and not so much the violence. Where if you have a movie like this that has this kind of similar plot, they might kind of focus on the action or the violence, and the character work is second. No. Joaquin Phoenix and his character is in the forefront, and we kind of see how his mind works and how sporadic it is, and how much darkness is in there, and what he's trying to fight through, and all the pain that he's suffering from. It's just, we feel every single ounce of it because of Joaquin Phoenix's performance and Lynn Ramsey's direction to get that out of him. And like I said, even though the ending is extremely bleak and you feel so much for his character, you just want to jump in the movie and like help him. But you know that like the person that he's with does have the potential to get that hope that you would want out of this character. But it's just a really great character study with some really interesting cinematography, and the violence, since it isn't focused on as much, it's extremely graphic and gruesome, but it really kind of gets at you. It's not that kind of fake over the top stuff. It's, it feels really kind of gritty and just grounded in some type of reality where you feel like you're actually watching people get murdered. But it's a really interesting vigilante story with a veteran who suffers from severe PTSD, and just really showing him as the focus. And I think it works well, man. And then when it gets to that end, it's a very powerful ending that just kind of stuns you for a little bit. So You Were Never Really Here is my number 4. And once again, just like with Isle of Dogs, fantastic score.
Well, I'm going to pass on this one and move on.
Oh, look at that.
Move on to my number 3, which is Hereditary. This is a feature debut somehow. I don't know how that's possible. I feel like we're living a lie. But this one is let's just say it's a horror movie, but in very specific ways that don't really reveal themselves until the end. Because until then, it's a very nervy suspense thriller that happens to be about a family headed by Gabriel Byrne and a revelatory Toni Collette. Colette's character's mother has died and has apparently passed on some of her own troubles to her children, and Colette, in return, has done the same, it seems. And there's some, business involving demonic possession, perhaps. There's a seance. There's the big Sting heavy music score. There's a lot of shots of people in the foreground with something freaky going on in the background. There's the spiritual imagery. There's sequences of explaining how to communicate with the spirit world. All of this is present, and yet the movie does something completely new with it, because we reach the climax and it reframes all of that to be not what we think it is at all. and it's a very, very, very bleak movie, but it's also an exploration of family and trauma and grief and mental illness. I love this movie. I think Toni Collette's performance is the best female performance so far this year, for sure. And I think it has the intimacy of a family drama and also the frights of a really, really terrific horror movie that feels like a new event for the genre. It's pretty amazing stuff. And so that is my number 3. It's Hereditary. And also I want to give mention to the 2 kids in the movie, Alex Wolff and Millie Shapiro. Both great, particularly Wolf, in a very physically demanding role, and so that's my number 3 is Hereditary.
Joel, do you just like doing this to me? I'm gonna have to pass again. Is this your game that you're playing, sir? So I will pass. But my number 3 is back to the original pass that I did on Joel, and that would be 3 Identical Strangers. This by far, if I had to listen. There was a lot of movies that I liked at the festival. Hell, even some of them were my top 10. Or, maybe top 20 in some capacity with, like, Won't You Be My Neighbor, First Reform, Cameron Post, Generation Wealth, 8th Grade. I watched a lot of great stuff at that festival. But if there's any movie that can stop all those in its tracks, it's this one. Because just like what Joel said, beyond the synopsis of the movie, which is a person goes to a college, realizes he is a twin, then they realize they are a part of triplets, and that's it. That's all I knew going in. That's all Joel knew going in. We sat down, and through that hour and 36-minute runtime, you are riveted from start to finish. The director, Tim Wardle, which, he noticed my tweet as soon as we walked out of it because I couldn't believe what I just saw. I was like, the best thing about this is that Tim Wardle was able to balance so many different genres and kind of weave it into this roller coaster quilt of a movie, and it works. And it starts out like a light comedy, like almost like Dazed and Confused, then it dives into drama territory, then it dives into almost horror, thriller, suspense. You're like, what am I watching? And as you're watching it, you go, wow, this is such a great movie. Who wrote this? And it's like, nah, fam. This is a documentary. This is based on real life. This is a real life story from the 80s. And as you're watching it, you don't think of it as a real story. You're just like, wow, this is a really compelling, piece of fiction. No, it's not. And that's what's so great about it, is that you completely get lost into the movie. You're just really invested in all 3 of these people and just kind of see their story play out. And like what Joel said, get into the heart of like this weird corruption scandal that you're just like, why are people doing this? Like people are evil, folks. Just watch out. But no, 3 Identical Strangers is by far one of the best documentaries I've seen in quite some time. And it was really tough to pick between this and Won't You Be My Neighbor. I know a lot of people are riding that high right now from Mr. Rogers, and I totally get it. I love that one equally. But what this one did, because with the Won't You Be My Neighbor, I knew kind of how the documentary was going to go. I didn't know some aspects about his life, but I knew structurally how it was going to go. I did not know how this was going to go, and I think for the unpredictability factor, I have to put this high up. It is definitely one of my favorites of the year, and I really hope, Joel, I know it's kind of impossible because we probably will. I hope we don't see any more great movies throughout the year because I want this to stay on there. I rarely have documentaries on my top 5 or 10, but hey, as of right now, my top 10 does feature 3 Identical Strangers and Won't You Be My Neighbor. So, and Generation Wealth, because I like that one too. So we're doing pretty well so far. So, Joel, there's really nothing more to say because it's kind of hard to talk about it without going into spoilers. So if you guys love documentaries and true stories, I highly recommend this one.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, it's so sad that we can't include Generation Wealth because there would be two documentaries on my top 5. Let's just say that. So yeah, it's a great movie. I have a feeling that my top 5, or at least maybe my like top four have a really good chance of staying on here. I would be surprised if the year turns in that direction. Certainly my top two um, are going to be are going to be on there. But yeah, so my number two is your number four, which is You Were Never Really Here. I love this movie. It's so hypnotic, and I think that's actually a perfect word for it because it puts you into this hypnotic state, and then by the end, it snaps its fingers and you're awake again. And by that I mean it offers a couple of really jarring twists, and that's sort of the snap of its fingers. And you're right, because it's both intimate and also violent. This is a slice of life, character study. It's literally a slice of this person's life. It's a single job among many, and there's nothing super duper significant about this in relation to the other jobs that he's done. But we just happen to be watching this one, and we get a sense of how his job is. How it affects him, and particularly as a study of PTSD doing this, and it's a great performance from as you put it, Phoenix. I'm just kidding. Great performance from Phoenix, some of his best work, if not his best work. And
that's what's so great about Phoenix is that he has so many great roles. It's kind of hard to pick like
it really is.
One.
Yeah, I mean, it might be like, at least for recently speaking, it might be either this or The Master.
Yeah, I was fixing to say that this and The Master are probably his two best so far.
Yeah, and what a career to have those two.
Right?
That's a tough. It's a great screenplay too, because it leaves all of the particulars of a revenge picture. It strips them all down to the skeleton. And then how I put it was that it discards the skeleton, leaving only the meat and the sinew. Because all we get here are the meaty, sinewy parts of the plot. We don't have a skeleton. It's not that kind of movie. It's, like I said, it's a slice of life. It's not about the plot. It's about following him around through this plot. And he's on screen the entire time, essentially. And, and it's just fascinating how Ramsey is able to kind of consider him almost like a petting zoo animal. In a certain way, there's kind of a glassy, he kind of exists behind a glass window from us for the rest of for the entirety of the movie. But we're still allowed a bit of a peek into his mind, and it's not a pretty place, and it's not a pretty job that he has. But it's just such a hypnotic movie, and I loved every second. I was shocked by the end as well. I mean, it's certainly one of those interpretive things that's really it's going to be divisive whenever people catch up to it. But I hope they do, especially because the Blu-ray's coming out pretty soon, and so yeah, so certainly catch up with this because it's quite something. And so that's my number two is You Were Never Really Here.
All right. So I've already talked about that one. So I guess I can move on. And unfortunately, with my second pick, it's gonna spoil the first one. So I just it's the way it goes, folks. But what's really fascinating about my second pick is that Joel has no idea what it is. I think he has like some clues to what my first one is.
I might have an idea of what it is, but go ahead.
Damn. Well, I'm hoping to confuse him. So this is how I do it, folks. I gotta ramp it up and see if I can trick Joel into thinking his pick is wrong, and it's psychological torture. This is how I do it. All right. So my second one. When I saw it at first, I really loved it, and I remember being on the podcast. I don't think Joel was high on it, but he wasn't as high on it. And as I kept thinking about it, and just thinking about it, I have certain images, and it plays along with my first pick too. Certain images in my head that just never leave me, and that is the sign of a good movie. Where even if it was like, somewhat kind of bad. There's just something about it to where I can't stop thinking about it. And believe it or not, it happened last year with Mother, where I liked the movie quite a bit, but man, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I bought it. I bought a movie that I just kind of liked because I wanted to examine it further on a filmmaking level and just kind of dissect it. I kind of want to do it with this one once I get enough money to actually buy a copy of it. But you know what? The best thing about this movie, believe it or not, is its sound design. And I remember when Joel and I were talking about it, that I really hope, since this played out earlier in the year, that Annihilation gets some type of award love, because it's probably one of my favorite sci-fi horror films I've seen in quite some time. So if you guys don't know what this one's about, Natalie Portman is a biologist, and she kind of signs up for this expedition where there's this shimmer shield that's around this certain area. They go in there, and inside the shimmer, it kind of messes with time, and there's no laws of nature that apply, so it's just kind of chaotic in there, and you kind of see what's kind of powering this entire thing, and it's really terrifying to watch. And that's all I will say. I won't reveal what's actually in there. But from the moment it starts, it's like, okay, Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, they're a couple. It's like, cool, something weird's kind of happening. But man, once they get in that shimmer, it is some of the most interesting sci-fi I've seen on screen. It was just so inventive, so beautiful and haunting at the same time. I thought the CGI, the shimmer was bad, but it was terrifying, because it looks bad from a CGI standpoint, but like I kind of don't want to go near it because like I feel like something bad's gonna happen in there. So I actually thought the kind of downplaying on the CGI worked a little bit for it. I thought the ending of the movie was really great. It really just kind of shoves a lot in your face, and the sound design and the music, it gives you goosebumps. I try to do it for my girlfriend all the time. It's like it's like a really loud like Inception noise, but even creepier. And so the ending of the film is really powerful. I really just like the way it was directed and the way the animatronics looked. It's just creepy, man. And the bear scene is the type of noise that doesn't leave your memory at all. I still think about that noise periodically, and just it gets under your skin. It's the type of sci-fi that has enough elements to really draw out really terrifying, like skin crawling horror, but also some kind of thought provoking science fiction there as well. And it's just a wonderful blend. I think Natalie Portman does a really great job. I feel bad for her because she's always in movies that bomb nowadays, and I think, and I will give Paramount credit, and it goes back to what the whole mother thing, because they distributed that one as well. I'm glad that they're taking risk. I want them to take risk on stuff like this, even if people aren't as high on it as I am. I hope they just keep giving filmmakers like this kind of free range, do whatever they want. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, but I think what Alex Garland did here was do just that. Take a movie to where he doesn't really spoon feed anything to you. When the ending of the movie happens, it's not really spoon fed, but you can. It's very not predictable, but it's like, okay, I kind of saw it going that way, but he still directs it in a way with either the cinematography or the sound design and the music to really have this kind of like brain scrambling experience where like you don't know what you're watching, but you want to keep watching it, because my hair, like, I'm not even joking when I say this, my hair on my arms were actually raising during the whole third act when the music was playing. It grips you and it doesn't let go, and Garland forces you to watch this stuff, and it's like, it's terrifying, because if it actually happens in real life, you're like, I don't want to go anywhere near that stuff. So I thought all the performances were great. Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaac, good stuff. Tessa Thompson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Gina Rodriguez is really great. It's a really solid cast to take us through this crazy science fiction adventure, and I think what Garland did, and you know what, I might be controversial here, but I'll say it. I like me some Ex Machina. I actually think this is better. If I had to pick one right now to watch, I would want to watch this one, just because I appreciate what Ex Machina did, and it's got some mind-blowing CGI, rightfully so. It won the Oscar for it. But in terms of ideas and scope and just the way this one made me feel in the moment while I was watching it in the theater, just from the pure craftsmanship of what Garland did to kind of suck you into the experience, I got to go with this one. So this is my second choice.
Interesting. I definitely liked it. I want to watch it again. I think that the second act kind of falls into routine a bit as they're investigating all of this stuff. They come upon a threat, and they do that multiple times. But there are some really terrifying scenes for sure. It's more thoughtful than some science fiction commonly is right now, especially the funny, silly stuff.
Joel, can you make the bear noise?
No, I'm not going to do that. I think I would awaken some sort of
I was just going to say, we're going to
demon.
There's going to be like some demon over our shoulder, like, oh wow, that was actually like the sound to open up the gates of hell. That was weird.
It would open them up, and then they would all fly away from it in terror. That's what would happen. It's enough to frighten Satan. Yeah, it's quite a good movie. I like this one a lot. I want to see it again. I do. I haven't bought the movie yet, but it's definitely one to buy because it's really thoughtful and good. I like the choice. Well, guys, my number one.
Well, my number one.
I've said what it is.
Well, my number one as well because I passed on it. So, I wonder which one.
Well, a certain company definitely ties together our top choices. So. My number one is obviously First Reformed. This is one of the most remarkable films I've seen in a while. It comes from director Paul Schrader, and it stars Ethan Hawke as Ernst Toller, who's a pastor. He's dealing with three major trials and tribulations right now. The first one is the reconsecration of his church by the big God Mall across the street, a much bigger church. And also a very controversial energy company that has made the nearby lake into a Superfund site with all the dumping of waste into it. And then he's also dealing with a parishioner who, played by Amanda Seyfried, who complains that her husband, who's an environmentalist, has been radicalized and has a plan for violence. And he's also got failing health due to an alcohol dependency. This is a movie that is about, ultimately, faith. This man has none of it over the course of the movie, and it very much falls in line with the films of Ingmar Bergman, particularly Winter Light, although it goes in a very different direction from that by the end. And I believe that it's as good as any Ingmar Bergman film, which is certainly high praise because Bergman's one of the greats. But here we have a protagonist in Ernst Toller to equal those of two previous protagonists in Schrader's films, particularly Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, of course, played by Robert De Niro, who discovers the true nature of a political candidate. So obviously he loses faith in an institution. And then we also have Jesus Christ, as played by Willem Dafoe in The Last Temptation of Christ, who's begging God to tell him what he wants him to do. And so now we have a pastor who takes up a diary as an experiment to find out whether or not God will speak to him, and it definitely falls in line with those previous two characters. It's almost as if like the stories of C.S. Lewis and Lee Strobel, who were not men of faith and became men of faith whenever they were actually trying to look and find out whether or not God didn't exist. It's sort of like that in reverse. He's a man of God, and he's discovering that maybe there's nothing there. And there's nobody speaking to him because there's no voice coming down from the heavens to tell him, what's going on. When he prays, it's an act of pain. It's not an act of prayer, and that's pretty telling. And this movie is exactly what films about faith should be. They should poke and prod at its very core. And I love this film. It features one of the best performances of the year from Ethan Hawke, and I love every second. I think it's also got some of the boldest filmmaking in the last 25 years in the last 10 minutes of the movie. I think that this movie, it cuts out at a certain point, and it's completely unexpected. where that ends, but it's also perfect. And I love this film. I think it's a masterpiece. Honestly, I would bring out the word. I can't really bring out the word for any of the other movies on the list, but it is a masterpiece. So that is my number one, is First Reformed.
That is very interesting, and this is actually I'm not making this up for entertainment purposes on the podcast. I can show you text as proof, and I will show Joel just to give him a heart attack. I actually have one of my friends that lives here in Dallas that asked me to be a guest on his podcast, and I said, I'm busy this night. What are you guys talking about? He said First Reformed. I said, well, since I'm not going to be on it, what did you think of it? He did not like it. Like, he hated it. And so I find that interesting because, like, Joel and I have been talking about it pretty nicely, and, I've heard great things, and it's like I haven't really heard anyone kind of say it's awful. And so, which is a great segue into my number one, because apparently Joel and I are the only ones that like Hereditary, because it has a D cinema score. People spit on this thing, and they just like, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. There's even a certain YouTuber online that says it's one of the worst films she's ever seen. It's like, do you watch anything? That's, hey, listen, but back to First Reform, though, real quick. It's a great pick. I liked it quite a bit. I did have an issue with the quote-unquote villainry of the movie and how mustache twirly it was. But you know what? Someone commented below my review and said that's kind of the point. That's how Ethan Hawke's character kind of sees these people. And you know what? From that perspective, I buy it. And maybe when I rewatch it, maybe I can reevaluate my grade and just take that caveat off and give it a little higher. But I will stand by my grade for right now.
I will say that maybe I only partly agree, because it's clear that not only he sees them as that, there's another character that does.
And that's totally fine. Maybe I missed that.
No.
So
what I mean is very, very specifically. I don't know if it's about missing it or not. I think it's very specifically there's another character that sees them that way too. So certainly that's a good point, but I think that it's more specifically political than that person was saying. I think that there's a very clear political point that the movie is making. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, and then, like, when they kind of commented on it, I was like, oh, that's a good point. I was just saying, for me personally, like, I didn't even think about that, and so they brought up a good point and made me kind of reevaluate my whole situation. So hey, when I rewatch it at the end of the year, when when A24, if you're listening to this, when you send that beautiful package over, we thank you kindly. When we get our screeners and stuff at the end of the year, I will definitely rewatch it again, as well as my number one pick. Guys, it's got to be Hereditary. It just has to be. One of the few movies where from start to finish it was unpredictable. What I was watching was magnificent filmmaking, whether it be using kind of like this Wes Anderson cinematography where stuff is symmetrical and really kind of let you linger on the scares a little bit, or wonderful kind of just piercing acting from Toni Collette or Millie Shapiro and Alex Wolff. It's like there are some images and scenery in this movie that will haunt you. The nightmare sequence, and Joel knows what I'm talking about, where Toni Collette comes into Alex Wolff's room, still creeps me out just from the way she looks and what's drenched on her.
The object on the side of the road.
Oh my god! Ugh. Oh god! Yeah. Well, and speaking of that goes to the whole unpredictability thing. I had no idea that was even going to happen, and Alex Wolff is, like you said, using really wonderful physical acting. And there's a scene where he bangs his head on a desk, and Brian actually shared this fact with us. Alex Wolff did that, and he broke his nose, right?
Yeah.
So he actually he did some method acting, and just
too
really,
full method, way too far.
It was way too far, but you know what? The scene was effective, and I appreciate his work. Really wonderful acting, award-worthy performances. I love me some Toni Collette, but I've always said from the get-go when I reviewed this thing, I think Alex Wolff is actually the star of this thing, just from his character arc that he has from beginning to end. But hey, Toni Collette does some really creepy stuff that really kind of lingers on you. And speaking of the creepy factor from Ari Aster, first-time writer-director, he knows how to scare people. He leaves it on shots that make you feel uncomfortable and to really make your skin crawl. There's a couple shots where there might be something slightly hidden in the background, but you can't really tell, but you know it's there. And he stays on the shot because he knows how uncomfortable it makes you feel. And it's not this, cheap jump scare, fast editing. It's stuff that lingers on that really permeates your brain with images that you wish you did not have. But that's what's so effective about this horror film. Now, I mentioned horror, but this is also a drama. This is a family drama. There's a lot of baggage within this family. A lot of stuff is happening to where this drama is kind of played out in a horrific tone. And then, like I said, going back to the unpredictability nature, it gets into maybe some other subgenres of horror that I didn't expect, but I'm actually down for because it got so crazy towards the end that I was like, hey, Ari Aster used a progression of tension and horror and ratcheted up each scene, and I thought it worked. A lot of people are going to get turned away by the kind of subgenre hopping, if you will. I thought it worked just because I enjoyed the thrill ride it took me on. Ari Aster knew when to show stuff, when not to show anything. Like Joel was mentioning, the thing on the side of the road. I won't mention what it is, but you know it's there, but it doesn't play into effect until like 10 minutes later, and you're like, oh, damn. Like, it just kind of hits you in the face, but that's what Ari's, kind of filmmaking was all about, was really aggressive type of horror imagery that, when I watched the trailer that one critic was throwing out the Exorcist kind of comparison, I was like, there's no way. Joel used the M word on First Reformed. I actually think Hereditary will go down as one of the best horror films, not only of this decade, but probably of all time. And give it a few years, and I think people will kind of turn around to it. It isn't a movie that spoon feeds you. I like me popcorn blockbuster fare. I love me The Conjuring, Insidious, pretty much anything from Blumhouse, Saw. I love my stupid horror films, but you know what? This one makes you think. Ari uses his craftsmanship to make something unique that does play on a blockbuster level, but is also really indie. So it's a nice blend of both worlds, to where I actually think a lot of people could enjoy this movie, but since there's a lot of people that are accustomed to jump scares and all that stuff, they probably watched this and was like, this isn't for me. I'm not saying, I'm not going to be name calling and say you're dumb, you're an idiot for not liking this movie. That's just not your speed because you're not used to it. If you watch more stuff like this and not just the PG-13 jump scare stuff like Truth or Dare, you might end up liking this stuff. If this is one of the first ones you jumped into, yeah, it might be a little jarring. So just watch more stuff like this and maybe you'll have an appreciation for it. And a couple of things I forgot to mention that I really enjoy, or three things. One, the ending is crazy as hell, but I loved it so much. It is some of the most graphic imagery I've seen in a horror film in quite some time, and you'll know when you see it. So that really left an impact on me when I left. Two, the music. Haunting stuff, really just kind of captures this crazy type of story that just really makes the whole thing just about as eerie as the story makes it out to be. And then the third thing, I really appreciated the miniature type of angle that Ari Aster had. Toni Collette makes miniature models and their houses, and there's even one of her house and stuff. I found that kind of awesome because not only did the cinematography emulate a miniature as, she was doing miniatures, but it also kind of ties in to the theme of the movie, which I guess without spoiling anything, it's like, I'll just say worshiping things. I found it fascinating because miniatures are stuff that we create, And I guess if the cinematography, is like a miniature and the people that are in them, like the actors are like almost like miniatures. It's almost like, what am I trying to say? Like someone's watching them, like a god or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but I liked that. I'm not making any sense, but maybe Joel can help me out. But that's my number one pick. A24 did it once again, and Toni Collette. If you're listening to this, there's a couple of scenes in this that just really get under my skin in the best way possible. And also that upside down shot of her banging the head on a certain door. Good stuff. So yeah, if you want a horror movie that's actually like not jump scary and really just kind of takes its time, it's a slow burn and really uses some inventive filmography or filmmaking techniques, then this one's for you. So Hereditary, my number one, Joel. I don't know if anything else can beat it, but we will see. We still got 6 more months to go.
That's how I feel about First Reformed. Although, well, probably even more strongly, because I honestly feel as strongly about that as being the best movie of the year that I felt about like Moonlight and Lady Bird and Under the Skin. So I really don't know. We shall see. Under the Skin made it, like 7 months or 8 months or whatever.
Did you say Moonlight, Under the Skin, Lady Bird? Those are all A24, Joel. What are you trying to say?
A24 total is made up of total hacks. I'm just kidding.
That's what that
is. Yes. All right, sir. So remind us of what our lists were again.
All right. So going down to the dumpster fires, for Joel's 5 through 1, you got Supercon, Acts of Violence, The Forgiven, Vanishing of Sydney Hall That People Wanted, or whatever the title was, and then Woody Woodpecker. For me, I just can't believe that's even on there. Number 5 for me is Kings. Then goes Proud Mary, Truth or Dare, 15 to 17 to Paris, and The Leisure Seeker. For Joel's best so far, going 5 on up, Hearts Beat Loud, 3 Identical Strangers, Hereditary, You Were Never Really Here, and First Reformed. For myself, you got Isle of Dogs, You Were Never Really Here, 3 Identical Strangers, Annihilation, and Hereditary. It's very rare, folks, that you will have, what is that, 1, 2... Joel and I have 3 of our top 5 the same, and that probably won't happen ever again. So we're kind of different for the most part, but that's kind of cool. So yeah, but I don't care about my list or Joel's list. We're a bunch of hacks. So let us know down below what are some of your favorite ones of the year so far and your least favorite. I would like to know if there's any ones that I missed, or if you're like, man, you're wrong. This list is correct. Yeah, you're probably right. My tastes are always terrible, but you know what? I know Joel's got great taste, so whatever he says goes. So if your list is not like Joel's, you're worthless. And no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, let us know down below what you thought are the best.
If you don't have First Reformed as your number one, then you're lying to yourself and to us. I'm just kidding.
Well, Joel, I hate to break it to you, but your number 3 is my number 1, so technically I'm still in the same ballpark, so you know what? You can't really get mad at me too much. That will do it for this week's episode, guys. No box office or anything, but Joel, what are we doing next week for episode 237?
Well, next week brings this week's Marvel movie. I'm just kidding. It's, of course, Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to be our main review. And I might offer an extra review of the first Purge. We'll see, because I'm seeing that on Tuesday. I might as well go ahead and do that, I suppose. And then I guess we'll go through July. We've got Skyscraper the week after that. We've got what is the Equalizer 2, I believe on the 20th, right? And then
yes.
Yeah, and then or the weekend of the 20th, whatever, the 20 whenever we record. And then, of course, Mission Impossible Fallout for the last weekend of July. So that's July.
Did you want to review 8th Grade when it comes out?
That might be one of my extra reviews. That might be the extra review with Mission Impossible, actually.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, So that's what we got. I'm probably going to be doing an extra review every week. I haven't figured out what those are for the show. I haven't figured out what those are yet. We'll see, but certainly 8th Grade's one of them. It's just a matter of whether or not I want to do one next week. We'll see. So, but the main reviews, those are our reviews in July.
Well, you know me, man. Superhero movies, I'm always down for. So I'm excited for next week. We get to see our final Marvel Studios movie until next year with Captain Marvel in March. So it'll be bittersweet. But at least I will look forward to the Blu-ray of Infinity War and just watching that over and over again and crying like a little baby at the end every single time. So that's what I'll look forward to in August when that comes out. But yeah, so that's what we're doing next week and then the following weeks in July, just to give you guys a little heads up, a little flavor of what we are doing next. Joel, where can the lovely people find you online?
You can find my writing at joelonfilm.com. I've got 3 reviews up this week, including Sicario and Uncle Drew, and I caught up with Midnight Sun on Blu-ray. None of them are very good, so not a good weekend. And then you can also obviously find this list in written form that we just did. You can follow me on Twitter at Real Joel Copling. That's REEL Joel Copling. You can find some of my writing at DallasMovieScreenings.com, although you won't find much for the past month or so. And also on Letterboxd at J Copling. So there you go.
Yeah, if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Real Chase Lee. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you get other reviews that I don't do on this show, like eating animals. I did a couple of films requested by indie filmmakers. They wanted me to review their film. Just I got a bunch of stuff. You guys just have fun with that at your leisure. But and then of course for this podcast, if you're listening to iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, whatever, please like, favorite, and spread this around and share it and tell people this is the definitive movie podcast that you love listening to, and maybe they'll like listening to us as well. And we thank you if you are a new person that has come to listen to us. Continue to listen to us, and next week you'll actually get to hear the format of the show. And if you're a returning listener, you guys are always awesome because we have the best fans around. Don't really know where most of you are at, but you guys are all awesome, and you guys are all living in my heart. We all love you. Joel does not, but I always tell him every day, Joel, these people have feelings, and he's just super cynical, guys. You have to give me props from what I'm working with. So yeah, so that will do it for this week's episode of Real Me and Colin Movie Podcast 236. Next week, Marvel movie again, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Should be a lot of fun. That is Joel over there. I'm Chase. You guys are awesome. Keep it chill, and all the links will be in the description below. Peace out. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.